Hello, it's Shads with what's going to be a new series. This is nostalgia. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to call the series just yet, but at the moment it's nostalgia. Essentially, I'm going to be covering all the consoles that I used to play when I was a kid, right the way up. Well, from when I was a kid, right the way up to all the consoles that I'm playing now. Highlighting some of my favourite games and some of the games that I thought weren't quite so good. So I started console gaming in 1988 with a Sega Master System. Now, there it is in all its glory. The Sega Master System was released in the UK in 1987, or in Europe, sorry, in 1987. But I didn't pick one up until 1988 because I had to wait for it for a Christmas present. And my parents weren't loaded. It wasn't, I mean, by today's standards, £99 wasn't a lot of money, but back then it's the equivalent of about 250 quid. So, yeah, a lot of money back then. And certainly when you're only getting around about sort of 20 pence a week pocket money, it's going to take a long time to save up. So yeah, that was a Christmas present, and it came with one cartridge which had two games on it. It's Astro Warrior, which I've already done a series of if you check out my retro videos, and Hang On. Now, I'm not sure, before I start with this, I'm using OBS Studio. I'm trying something a little bit new for this video. So I thought I'd try OBS Studio. I'm not sure that the audio on these games is going to come out because it kind of... I did a little test and some of it worked and some of it didn't. And frankly, I've spent enough time messing around with this and I just want to get it out so you guys can see it. So essentially, if the audio isn't working or it's a little bit loud or a little bit quiet, I'll try and adjust it on the fly if I can. But yeah, I'm going to kind of take you through the games and hopefully this works. So essentially, if I remember rightly, Hang On came out I'm just checking now, just bear with me because I've forgotten. It was 1985. So the Sega Master System came out in Japan, and it's called the System 3. No, the Sega Mark 3, I beg your pardon, in Japan, and that was in 1985. And Hang On featured on there along with Astro Warrior and another game called Pit Pot, I believe. And there was a few games obviously came out, and then they renamed it the Sega Master System in 1986, and it was released in North America. And then us in Europe got it a year later in 1987, and then I think it was 1989 it was released in Brazil. So yeah, the poor Brazilians had to wait a long time for this little baby. It wasn't exactly, well, for its time it was okay. Graphically it wasn't too shabby, with other games, machines and things like the NES that were around about the same time, and also these things like the Sinclair Spectrum on the computer side of things, the Sinclair Spectrum and the Commodore 64. It was kind of on a par really graphically with the Commodore 64, I suppose. So yeah, let's just jump on. There we go. Hang On. I'm not sure what the audio is going to be like for this, but fingers crossed it might. I can see the green light going up, so I'm only going to assume that the audio is okay. So this was pretty simple. It was just a case of pressing down. You had two buttons on the controller, accelerate and brake, and then you tap down to change up a gear between low, middle and top, and then up to change down a gear. You had was it 50 or 60 seconds to complete each stage on the course, and when you completed all the stages you went on to course 2. Each one was slightly more difficult than the last. You had different, you know, it got slowly more difficult as the time went on, more and more sort of bikes that you had to go past, and then as it sort of went on through the different levels you had chicanes and tighter corners and so on and so forth. It was a pretty solid game. Graphically it was pretty good. I mean, there wasn't any huge amount of sprite flicker in it. It was pretty basic, but it gave a good feeling of speed, and to be honest I did play it a lot, and I enjoyed playing this in the arcade as well. The Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, if you're in the UK, benefited from a remake of Hang On called Super Hang On. and that was graphically very much better, and you could get a turbo boost and stuff like that, but I'll cover that in the Genesis stroke Mega Drive video. So we're going to go back to... Actually, no, we're not going to go back. I was going to keep going back to the picture of the Master System, but I'll carry on. I'll carry on. So these came on a cartridge, the games came on a cartridge, but there was also another option, which was the card. Now the card, I will have to actually go back, there you go. So as you can see there, there's a card slot just above where the controller is, that little cutout bit at the front. Now the games that came on a card, the card was about credit card sized, and they were about half the price of a cartridge. If I'm not mistaken, it was about £29–30 for a cartridge back in the day, and the cards were £16.99. So yeah, it was about half price. The games weren't quite as good quality as some of the cartridges, and certainly as time went on and they added things like password saves and stuff like that, which you couldn't get on the card because there was just not enough space to save the game on the card. So yeah, 1986 saw the release of Ghost House. Obviously I didn't get these until 1988 when when I had the console itself, but the game was released in 1988, but I did have this game, and this was the card game that I was talking about. Now the premise was pretty simple. It was a platformy game. I'm not a huge platformy kind of guy really, as you'll probably watch from me playing this horribly. It was pretty basic. You had to wander around, you had to kill enemies to find the key, and then once you have found the key, you have to find one of Dracula's coffins, of which there are several dotted around the map. You have to unlock the coffin. Dracula comes out and he flaps around, and you have to hit him several times. Once you've hit him enough times, he dies. He heals you up, and then you then have to go on and find the next coffin to release him. There were special weapons in the way of, if you jumped up at a candelabra on the wall there, as you can see the little 3 candlesticks on the walls there, a knife will fly in from the side. Depending on which way you're facing, it will fly in from the side that you're facing. If you jump up and land on it, it knocks it to the floor. You can then pick it up and use it against Dracula, which will give you a better chance of killing him and do a lot more damage. You can also jump up at the light fittings, you know, the little light bulbs in the ceilings there, and hitting those will freeze all enemies for a short period of time, which is quite handy. I'm going to die there horribly. You see, I'm not doing particularly well. I'm trying to get that knife. So yeah, it wasn't a bad game for a platformer. Platformer games have never really been my favourite, but for a card for £16.99 for half the price of any of the other games that were around at the time, it wasn't too shabby, to be fair. Certainly graphically it wasn't too bad. The music was pretty good as well, if I remember rightly, especially the music when you're fighting Dracula. It's pretty cool. And those little orange frame things in the background, some of those you can press up against, and they're actually doors that take you to secret areas or areas that you can't normally access in the house as well. So that's pretty cool. Not too shabby. Moving on to 1987, I'd been playing a game in the arcades, which came in 2 formats. That was the stand-up console-y type thing where you have just a steering wheel and that, and there was a sit-down version of Outrun. Now this was at the time my favourite game in the whole world ever. It was an awesome driving game, and the version that you had, the cabinet version that you sat down in excuse me, where it moves and shakes and all that sort of stuff when you're driving, that was really, really good. Unfortunately, Outrun on the Sega Master System didn't translate very well. The only thing I will say about it is the hills on here. It was one of the first games on the Master System to feature hills, as far as I know, for driving, which gave it a little bit more depth and gave it a little bit more sort of like realism, if you like. But the sprite flicker on it was horrible. The audio was absolutely terrible, and I'm hoping for your sake that that this isn't coming out. I'm kind of hoping that you can't hear the audio on this, because basically the tyre squeal was like a beep, 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 and that was it. There was no engine noise. The music was pretty okay. It was pretty close to the original arcade. Well, no, it wasn't close to the original arcade. The tune was the same as the original arcade. Audio-wise, it was nowhere near. At the end of the day, it was only like two channel stereo sound, or mono sound, I think, if I remember rightly. So it was never going to be as good as the arcade. But interestingly enough, on this game, on the ZX Spectrum, the graphics were not colour like this, anywhere near like this, but with the Spectrum version of the game, you got a recording on a cassette tape of the original soundtrack from the arcade machine, so you could actually play that in the background, and at least it sounded like you were playing it, even if it didn't look like it, whereas this never really looked or sounded like it. I still loved it though. I still played it a lot on the Master System, but I think graphically and audio-wise, personally, I think Hang On actually had the better of the gameplay and the better of the graphics. Moving back to that lovely picture there. Now, 88, but I beg your pardon, a game came out that changed my world. I was heavily into Dungeons and Dragons, the original Dungeons and Dragons, not Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So the basic D&D red books. There were blue books, black books, and gold books. I had the red, blue, and the black. I think I never had the gold, but I digress. So Japanese RPGs. Now, this game, I've already featured the PC version of this game in my retro videos and other videos, but this one, it was a game changer for me. Ys Vanished Omens. Now, graphically, it was pretty good. I mean, for its time, I mean, it's pretty cute. Even now, I think graphically it holds up. It looks good. You know, those pictures don't look particularly good, but the actual gameplay itself is pretty cool. It was hard as nails. The mine section that you go into was really, really difficult. But you'll see around about there, I think, is the player health. Beep, beep. Now that little yellow bar, if you're going to go into the mines, if that yellow bar isn't up to the maximum all the way to the right there, you ain't going to stand a chance. It was a long game, a really big old game, and one of the very first games to have a save on the cartridge, so you could actually save the game. There's no way you'd be able to complete this in one sitting, absolutely no way at all. Graphically and audio, the music on this game was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I mean, it didn't sound like a full orchestra or anything like that, but the tunes were really, really good. And I really, really liked the sound effects and everything, the graphics of the game, and the whole storyline. I mean, well, it was a massive game, and I'm not going to harp on about it because I could actually sit here and talk about it for the rest of this video, but I'm not going to because I want to try and keep down to under 30 minutes. So yeah, the Ys Vanished Omen, definitely one of my all-time favourite Japanese RPGs, definitely one of my all-time favourite Master System games, and I suppose it was the Sega's version of Legend of Zelda. Which is another series that I'll cover in another video when I can sort out licensing to be able to play Nintendo videos on. I'm going to have to become a partner, or a tube partner, or a YouTube partner or something with Nintendo, so that I don't get content claims to when I do Nintendo videos. So yeah, that was 1988, and then the game changer, 1989, another game changer hit my world. I'd been playing Wonder Boy 1, which was a platform game. Wasn't overly impressed. Wonder Boy 2 was an RPG platformy type game, and certainly the only platform game that I really showed any amount of effort and time into. So yeah, I waited and waited, and for Christmas in 1989 I got Wonder Boy 3, and I played it on Christmas Day, and I played it the following day, and the following day, and the following day, and I completed it on New Year's Day. And it was certainly one of the very few games I completed in such a short period of time. I played it like my world was going to end soon, and I needed to complete it to survive. Love it, absolutely love it. Graphically, it was pretty cool. The plot line was really good. The music was really good. The characters were really good. You started out, as you can see here, as human. And this basically bit here takes place. This is the ending of Wonder Boy 2 in the labyrinth, trying to find the mecha dragon. But you get this basically gives you several characters. You start out as human, as I said, and your quest is to be changed back into human, because when you fight the dragon, as you'll see in a second, you get changed into Lizard Man, and then Lizard Man has to trek off and go and find another dragon, and when he finds that dragon, he gets changed into Mouse Man, and so on and so forth. So basically the characters are: Lizard Man has the ability to breathe underwater, he can breathe fire, but he can't swim. Then Mouse Man can, there are certain blocks that he can grip onto with his little tiny claws, and he can like run up walls and run along ceilings and so on and so forth, and he's very, very tiny and get through small gaps. Then next up was Piranha Man, who could swim, breathe underwater obviously, and then there was Lion Man, who had a special attack where he arced his sword from the top of his head to the tip of his toes in an arc in front of him, so he could break blocks above him and at his feet as well, which was pretty cool, especially when you had the Thunder Sword, which broke certain magical blocks as well. Pretty cool. I'm doing really terribly against Dragon here. It's been a long time since I played this. And yeah, and then each one has a dragon that changes them into something else, and the final character is Hawkman, who can fly, and then he flies up into the castle in the clouds, fights the vampire dragon, and then gets turned back into human, and that's the end of the game. Now, there were other games following on from, well, sort of following on from this for the Genesis. Wonder Boy in Monster Land, or Monster World, sorry, was not too bad a game, and then there was like a Wonder Boy 5 equivalent, which was kind of like a sideways scrolling shooter in some respects, which was really, really weird. Never really got on with them. This, by far, my favourite in the Wonder Boy series, and probably I will go as far as to say my favourite all-time favourite Master System game. So, that being said, I kind of broke out into... I'd been playing, I had at the same sort of time as the Sega Master System came out, or just prior, I had access to a Toshiba MSX, which was my brother's computer, and there was a game on there called Nemesis, which was on a cartridge as well, made by a company called Konami. You might have heard of them. And that was a sideways scrolling shooter in the same vein as sort of R-Type, Scramble, and all that kind of thing. And certainly there were plenty of them about, but on the Sega Master System at the current point in time, Aerial Assault was probably my favourite of the sideways scrolling shooters. It wasn't too difficult. It had 3 difficulty levels. I usually played it on easy because I'm not a hardcore gamer. I'm still not. Graphically, it wasn't anything to shout about. I suppose it was a little bit better than sort of, well, I don't know. I mean, there were games like Thunderblade and so on and so forth. They weren't sideways scrolling, but graphically, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, it looks good. The power-ups are pretty cool. The enemies are believable and not too overpowered. The background scenery trolls along quite nicely. Trolls along? Scrolls along quite nicely. It looks good, and it's good fun to play, to be fair. It's a pretty basic game. The power-ups are quite difficult to pick up, as you saw me fail just then to do. But yeah, the power-ups are pretty good. There's quite a nice sort of selection of different power-ups you can get. So not too shabby a game. I'm going to touch on that briefly because there were later games which to be honest, I haven't really featured because R-Type was one that I was going to feature, but the R-Type clone or port for the Sega Master System was pretty terrible, to be fair. It suffered from a lot of sprite flicker, and there's a version on a different system for R-Type that I prefer, and it will feature on that one, so if you want to see R-Type, keep it peeled for that particular one. And then 1991 saw another RPG. Now, this one is the other end of the spectrum. Essentially what had happened is, in the past there were games in the arcade that also came to the Sega Master System, Golden Axe. Now, I've featured Golden Axe on the Genesis in one of my previous retro gaming videos. And the Master System versions weren't too bad. The Genesis versions were far superior graphically, but the Master System versions were doable. But they decided to break to do the thing they always seem to do at the time is, we found a game that's popular, we're going to milk it until it dies. And this is the point that it died. Golden Axe Warrior. Shocking, to be fair. It was certainly no Ys Vanished Omens, and it was certainly no Legend of Zelda, and it was certainly no what was the other game that I liked at the time? Golvelius. It tried to be all of them, and it was none of them. It was it was pretty terrible. Graphically, it's not too bad. At the end of the day, it's okay. And you had the same sort of magic that you had in Golden Axe. And you bought things, you had horns, and you could buy different weapons, as you can with all kinds of RPGs and Jap RPGs. But there was certainly nothing really special about this, and it was... It really had nothing to do, other than mentioning Death Adder. It had nothing to do with Golden Axe. You couldn't change to any of the other characters. You couldn't change to the female or the dwarf or anything. You just played the main guy with the horned helmet. And that was it. So yeah, it was pretty terrible, to be fair. Certainly nothing to shout about. And then it was around about this time that my Sega Master System decided to give up the ghost, and it was no more. It had played its last game. But I wasn't done with the Sega Master System itself. They no longer sold the Master System 1. They then brought out the Master System 2, which was sleeker, rounder. They got rid of the cartridge slot on the front, the card slot on the front, which was a nightmare if you had a card. I think they did some kind of adapter that you could do, a cartridge adapter that you put the cartridge in and then you slid the card into the top. But yeah, that was quite disappointing. But by the time that I got that, it came with a game that some of you might know, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now, as I've mentioned, I'm not a platformer, and I'm not a big fan of Sonic, any of the Sonic games, from any of the Sega game consoles at all. In the same way that I'm not a huge fan of Mario from any of the Nintendo consoles. Yeah, probably sacrilege, and I will probably be hung, drawn and quartered for saying that, but I don't know, not being a platform gamer, I didn't really enjoy it. They also had Sonic, what was it? Echo the Dolphin was another game on the Master System and the Mega Drive. Echo was kind of like a dolphin-y Sonic, I suppose. And again, I didn't really care much for those games either, as much as I might be hated for it. I never really got into any of the Sonic games. Sonic Pinball, none of them. I can't think of any that I really enjoyed, to be fair. And then I suppose as the Sega Mega Drive, the Sega Master System was bowing out, and I purchased in 1992, I think I purchased myself a Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. I think the last game I got for the Master System was Power Strike 2. Now, I'd played Power Strike, and it was a really, really good game. It suffered from horrific sprite flicker, but the power-ups in it were brilliant. Game, you know, the ships were pretty cool, the enemies were pretty cool, and the power-ups you could get were pretty cool, and it moved pretty quickly. But the sprite flicker was just sometimes it was difficult to see the enemies on the screen because they were flickering so much. They managed to turn it around for Power Strike 2. The game moved quickly. There was not quite so much in the way of sprite flicker. In fact, nowhere near as much in the way of sprite flicker. The power-ups were still really, really good. The bosses were still pretty good. The enemies were pretty cool as well. It was a pretty tough game. If I recall rightly, it was a pretty tough game. I mean, I didn't do particularly well when I was playing this here. But unfortunately, for each of these games, I just played about 4 minutes and then stopped, because I didn't really want to have to try and talk over 4 minutes. I knew I was going to just use snippets of them. And that's pretty much it. I hope the audio on those came out. If it didn't, I do apologise. I may well if it doesn't work out particularly well, what I might do is I might actually feature these games in another. Well, maybe I'll do like a compilation where I'll take those games that I've already recorded and I'll re-knit them into a compilation with no voiceover or anything. I'll just be those as a compilation video. But that's pretty much it. So yeah, I kind of got rid of my Master System around about 93, 94 as I moved on to the Genesis, stroke Mega Drive, depending on what part of the world you're from. So that will be my next video, which will be coming up hopefully next week, and I will see if I can sort out something out for the NES and the Super NES as well, so I can post some videos without getting Nintendo breathing down my neck asking for money. So if you've got any questions, or if you've got any comments, or if you've got any games that you really liked playing, please pop them in the comment section down below. I'll go back to big screen. There we go. Yeah, pop them in the comment section down below. Hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and I really appreciate any feedback that any of you got. Also hit me up on Twitter if there's any games that you want to see me play in the next one, which will be the Genesis. Give them a mention if I had them. I'm literally sticking to games that I had. I'm not sort of like sticking up games that I never had. It's literally games that I had and that I played and that I still own to a certain degree in one format or another. So drop them in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Take care for now. Bye bye.